Oh, there's Peter.
All right, and there's Mary's garage.
Yes, I'm sure.
Susan Brent Warren, that's Counselor Brent. There's us. It is one of those days where it's kind of nice to sit out at the open door of the garage. Okay, Peter, can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
All right, great. Okay.
Hey, Chad,
Yes, ma'am.
I logged in and started the meeting under the info account so that Cheryl would have access to the recording.
Okay, excellent. She'll appreciate that. Okay. Be right back. Yeah.
You'll get through. Thank goodness.
Counselor Brent, were you able to get your audio working?
It seems to be working right now.
Sounds good.
I'll let you know if things freeze up.
Okay. Counselor Rita?
Hey. I heard disclosure statement.
And then occasionally you'll see me on my phone. I'm not texting my wife to help with this. So,
Do you have one with you?
no, I don't have to.
Yeah, I think that works. He's heard just to say that and then and then it's mine.
Thanks, Jeff.
I'll turn my radio down.
Yeah.
Anyone heard from Counselor Smith?
No, not yet, other than he came in earlier to say he was going to be online. But I did give him instructions of where that link was.
Like your friend is back, Rita.
She never misses a meeting. She's totally in love with the council.
Wow.
She might have something to say later, I don't know.
Well, this is a good disclosure. Maybe she just gave it to me. Okay. This is the same, let me make sure. Because we should just, you want one? Yeah. Did she have that one? Because mine, I don't think it has the back page on it. So. That's the back. Let me copy it. Yeah, okay, so. We need it in here. We want to go ahead and get started then. Okay.
Do you want me to try to give Carrie a call?
Sure.
That's for Smith. Miss Christine?
Yes.
If you get a chance, if you could try to give Counselor Smith a call once we get things rolling. This phone just rang for me.
Okay. I will need you to text me his phone number because I don't have access to that information at home.
He's calling here. Well, Counselor?
The mask on, correct?
I'm not going to.
You're not gonna talk with your mask on? Oh,
I'm not
have
gonna
either.
talk with my mask off.
Oh, that's, I said on.
I'm gonna talk with my mask on.
Okay.
Kind of almost makes me want to go back to just doing them online.
Yeah, this is the first one. You,
I say, please, no.
I
The
know,
participation drops to 0.
Yeah.
that's true. This is the first one I've been to. Here.
through.
My goodness.
That's incredible, a year and a half.
It's as bad as it was a year ago.
No, you listen to hospitalizations tonight on the phone, and on TV, it's really taken off again.
I heard the other day, all the beds are full in local hospitals here, and they can't transfer either, so.
There's something like 500 short. I think I heard in the state.
You're probably not gonna get any ECMO down here. Heart, lung, bypass, which is how they're keeping quite a few of these people alive.
Jeez. Exhausting.
Yeah. I think I should just go ahead and start. It sounds like they got send links and whatnot.
He's trying to show them how to get the screen done, I think.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and open the hearing. And this is for an appeal submitted by John Banta, appealing the decision of the planning commission granting tentative partition approval to file number 21-01P to partition 1 acre of land into 3 lots at 1060 McCormick Garden Roads and further described as assessor's plat 6.10.3 DB tax lot 802. I'm going to read the hearing's disclosure statement. All persons testifying shall be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address if they wish to be notified of the decision. Continuances, appeals, or other procedural actions required by the code. The city zoning code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city's staff report. Public testimony should be limited to those criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body and parties to the hearing an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the city council or land use board of appeals, or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, any participant may ask planning commission that does not apply.
No. And neither does the continuance, so.
Okay. For an opportunity to provide additional relevant evidence. In this hearing, we are doing the hearing based on the information on the record. And we voted on that last meeting. The hearings body shall grant a request. We will finish on date today.
I think you can move to that.
Ask of the, do any of the counselors need to declare a conflict of interest, an ex parte contact, or personal bias?
No.
No. Carrie, Grant,
I do not have a conflict and no ex parte
No to both.
communication.
and I would just, I don't think I have a conflict of interest. Not sure about personal bias, but I was Joe's supervisor about 30 years ago. So I've known her for quite a long time. And is there anyone in the audience who has any challenge to the council's ability to make an impartial decision? And the next section is staff report,
Okay,
which is in the packet.
all right, would you like me to summarize that?
Please.
Okay. Councilors and mayor and applicants who's here today, what you have received on this decision up to this point is a record of from day one, starting in February of 2020, 2021. And up to the notice of decision, final order at the very back. I don't really want to take you through all this because I think you probably had a chance to take a look at it. But I'll just breeze through really quickly. And you know, first was the staff report. Then there's a excerpt out of the transportation system plan that talks about Railroad Avenue. And of course, that's what we're talking about tonight. This drawing or this aerial is a good indication of the topography on the side from McCormick Gardens Road, the frontage of McCormick Gardens Road, and then the wetlands are in blue between the high ground and what would be Railroad Avenue. So there's quite a bit of wetlands separating the buildable portion of the property where the property was being divided and Railroad Avenue. Okay, and then what else would I point out? The next page shows you the transportation system plan projects. And those that we will be talking about tonight is the G3, and it is the Trestle Railroad Avenue and all the way connected to Trestle and the north to the urban growth boundary for a road and a trail, a road that would include a trail. And we'll talk about that a little bit more because that's not what was required by the planning commission. That is not the road. Okay, I'll get to that. Even though it's in your TSP. And then you see standards of the road standards and the path standards in the transportation system plan. And then there's a whole lot of paper in here about the county decision because Mr. Banta, the Bantas, the whole started with the partition to separate their property, to separate the county portion of the property from the city portion of the property. That was the first partition, and that was done last year. And that makes life easier because on the north side is county, where they have to comply with county standards. And on the south side, the land is in the city, and then they comply with the city standards. And so then they came back, because you have to wait a year before you can divide again in by statute, and took both of those two parcels, those two new parcels, one the county, one the city, and asked to divide them again, both to the county and they requested to the city, and resulting in 2 new lots on the county portion and 3 lots on the city portion. What was 1 parcel in the long time, 1 parcel. So that's why you see then so many county reports and emails and back and forth between them and with the city. We coordinated quite closely to make sure that, you know, everything was working and coincidentally between the 2 jurisdictions, and it worked just fine. Part of the reason we needed to do that is because getting access to the back of these parcels has to go through the city portion and then along the property line going to like screen, but if you look at the map, you'll see that McCormick Gardens Road, and here's the big parcel 1, 2, and 3 in the city, and then there's 2 in the county. To get to the county piece, they asked that, the back piece, that they cross the city piece with an easement. And that was approved, that's fine, fire district said yes. So the easement does cross the back of the Vantage city parcel to reach the back of Vantage county parcel. Okay,
But can I say something? Or is
you can clarify if you want in the, after you, I'm supposed to say everything, then it's your turn.
okay, okay.
But if there's is there a fact that,
Yeah, well, the county allowed us to put a north easement to
yeah,
that back piece. So
right.
we no longer need to use the city side to get to the county back portion of property. So it's just those 3 lots that road is accessing.
Okay, thank you, because actually I didn't know that, and that was the plan initially, or maybe later you came back and said, no, we don't want to cross these parcels, cross the city parcel to get to the county 2 parcels. So they have subsequently done that with the county, great to know, okay, I don't think that hurts anything. And then, so I'll pass through all the county correspondence, and I think at this point I'll just go straight to planning commission's decision, which is at the very back, and it's, I think there's page numbers starting, ending on 13, and starting on 1 before that, so. Now, if I may just summarize where we are, how we got here, and what the problem is. If you can find the, well, if you can find the staff report or the notice of decision, page 4, you'll see verbatim the transportation improvements and access requirements in the zoning code. And this is important because these standards implement the transportation policy that your TSP and the subdivision ordinance. And who do they apply to? All developments are required to construct transportation improvements in accordance with the standards and procedures of this chapter. The following would be a new single-family dwelling or duplex if it fronts a street segment that's planned for a sidewalk or trail in the transportation system plan. Right off the bat, the standards that we have apply to this property. And you can see that goes further down to D, that no building permit may be issued until all required street improvements are in place and approved by the city manager or designee or otherwise bonded in conformance with the provisions of this code. Now, Gerhard did not have these provisions before the transportation system plan. This exact wording, this is all came straight from the transportation plan, so that this transportation plan could be implemented as it was intended to. So it's maybe new to us, because we haven't had very many subdivisions. I don't think we've had any since the TSP to apply these standards. And so I think they're a little bit foreign to what's been done in the past here. But it's quite clearly required in this case. And then the next page of the finding gives you more improvements to existing streets. We're putting in the single family home or duplex, page 5, that McCormick Gardens Road is a substandard street based on its TSP classification of the collector street, serving the neighborhood on the east side of the highway. And McCormick Gardens Road street tenants require in the long term, it's a plan, the TSP, but this is what we're trying to achieve now. 60 feet of right of way, 24 to 34 feet of pavement, and a shared path improvement on the east side of the street for bikes, pedestrians, tsunami evacuation. So the applicant is required to make those on their half. Now, that would not include this is McCormick Gardens Road now.
Right.
Not the west side where the path and the trail and railroad street is designated to be improved. So there's that section. And then the city manager, if you look at page 6, says may waive or allow deferral of street standards, including sidewalks, roadway, bicycle lane, underground utilities, landscaping as applicable under these certain conditions. And so the city found that the drainage and widening the street improvements to the west side of McCormick Gardens Road and the dedication of adequate area to connect railroad do not conflict with those listed criteria, with any adopted capital improvement plan, does not conflict, will not create a safety hazard. Obviously, it's going to be an improvement to the street and are likely to be improved in the planning horizon of the TSP, and the road improvements and dedication cannot be accomplished as part of a future larger project on the subject site because of site constraints, and just simply there would be no control to do that once the partition is recorded. So the I'm just going to keep going. But what I want to get to is the rest of it then turns into the planning commission's decision, okay? And what the conditions are. I think we can go to that because the applicant is appealing two of the planning commission's decisions. Let's focus on what those are, so you're totally comfortable with the request. Let's see. So what I have is a cover letter to you. This was supposed to be like the cover sheet of the city council staff report, okay?
The one dated 8/11.
Dated 8/11/21, and that's what I'd like to go through now. So before I do that, is everybody clear that McCormick Gardens Road is on the east side and the Railroad Avenue improvement and trail are on the west side, and then the wetlands are in between. The high ground, which will be developed for homes 1, 2, 3, and then 2 more in the county. And then this is the city's limits and the city's urban growth boundary. So what occurred after that approval was a letter from Clatsop County who said, well, McCormick Gardens Road, it just so happens is not into the city's jurisdiction because it's has never been transferred, and it's so close to the edge of the city limits that it's still a county road. And so that that was a question that was raised by the Clatsop County Public Works, Terry Hendricks, who said, this is, you know, it's a local rural road, as opposed to what we called it as, in the future will be a more developed city collector street with, you know, shared use path on one side, probably curbs, and then a little bit wider pavement, a little bit wider right of way. And then on the other side would just be curb and, you know, drainage, so just on one side. So now we're on McCormick Gardens Road, right? That's what we require. The county said, well, you can't really do that until we consider giving you the road. So it's a planning tool as far as they're concerned. So, you know, they rebutted some of the things that were in the report, which said, you know, you can't really require that because it's our road. And so then I told them after this letter came out, and this letter came out after the planning commission made their decision. So that was a little bit tricky to figure out what to do with it. And that's why we've taken a position to respond to their letter. And it's not exactly in the record, but it's important. So we're including it to explain it to you. And
Would it be helpful if we're getting into some pretty technical things. Would it be helpful if I just briefly summarize kind of how local standards and county and then our obligations for acknowledged plans work? Because it's.
can I just say one thing before you say that, and then you, yes, I mean, it's okay, Mrs. Mayor. So the county said, we have, once we give that road to the city, then it's yours to decide how to develop. And they have done that with Gerhart Loop and Road. They gave it to the city and let the city develop it. And then there's one other one, which I have in here. There's two roads. And so even though they said this is our road, you can't develop it, I said, well, for planning purposes, can we get what we need when and if we decide to give it to the city? Okay. And they might, if we want it.
Go ahead, Peter.
So we have a transportation system plan that's been acknowledged by the state, the LCD, and that is a required component of our comprehensive plan. So even though we think of them as two different plans, in some respects they're one and of the same, it's not unusual for a county or the state, for highways, they're owned by the state, for county roads to be in a city. And it's not unusual for those to be turned over to the city. Usually before that happens, the city requires a payment to be made because roads now are kind of viewed as a burden as much of a benefit. There's a third element to this, which is what's called a non-remonstrance agreement. So you've probably seen cities where there will be a block and the power will be above, and then for one lot, it will go down into the ground and there'll be a sidewalk and it'll be an orphan sidewalk. It's the only one on the block. And those are cities that don't allow a non-remonstrance agreement. A lot of cities, including Gerhart, have recognized that doing a sidewalk for the entire block or undergrounding for the entire block is far more efficient from a cost perspective because it's not being done piecemeal. And so the non-remonstrance agreement is an agreement that allows for nothing to happen until there are enough of the properties in that area that are required to make the improvements for the improvements to be made. And it runs with the land, not with the owners. So when these parcels, if this is required and a non-remonstrance agreement is signed, it runs with the land, and at some point in the future, if a series of contingent events happen, so if the county turns the road over to the city, if the city has enough owners that either want to form a local improvement district or simply have pulled permits that require them to do this, and there's enough weight that it makes sense to do the whole thing. At that point, those improvements could happen, and whoever owns the parcels at that point would not be able to remonstrate or to argue against them. It would be built and they would have to pay for their portion of that. That's usually done with a tool called Bancroft bonding that allows it to be paid over a 10-year period. Practically speaking, that's how it happens. So there are a couple of questions that are kind of bigger than this conversation, but to keep in mind. The one is that we have the acknowledged transportation system plan, which is part of our acknowledged comprehensive plan. So if we're going to deviate from that, we would need really good findings from the council as to why we would do that. And maybe there are enough complications between the county road and other things that the council might want to do that. But the decision on those would need to be so specific as to this situation that it doesn't create precedent for the rest of the city to say, well, even though it's part of our acknowledged transportation system plan, we don't have to do it. And again, the other thing too is because DLCD staff worked with us in order to approve this, and these are the components that they want to see, we would need, usually what they want to see if you're going to deviate from them is an alternative. So in the event that you don't want the non-remonstrance and you just simply don't want these to be conditions, we would say the reason that we're going to deviate from the TSP in this instance is because like there's the eminent building of a path in this other area. That's normally the type of findings that they would want to see. So those are just, so backing up to kind of 1,000-foot view, that's kind of how this looks. And depending on the approach that we want to use, you know, it's required under the TSP. So those findings are really easy. In the event that you want to do something else, we would need to be just very specific in how we worded it, because at some point we would need to be able to articulate why to the DLCD staff.
Great, and so that, I think with that background, I can go straight to the 2 conditions that they're asking that they're appealing. All right, and that's on my cover sheet. And it's the, in the very back of the packet and the final order from the planning commission. So either way, the first condition that they're appealing is number 3 of the planning commission decision. And we're going to want to find that. It's on page 12, the very back of your record. Number 3. Here's what it says. The final partition plat shall be modified to incorporate a portion of the planned Railroad Avenue pedestrian shared use path identified as CS3 project G-3, located along the west boundary of the parcel. The path should be an estimated 40 to 45 feet wide in order to connect to existing right-of-way to the south. The path may either be dedicated to the public or defined on the plat as a public access easement. So I jumped back to the trail now because that's the way it is in this order. But let's talk about this for just a minute. As far as I understand, the applicant feels the 40 to 45 feet on the very west part of their parcel is too wide. And the reason they're objecting is because you see the shared use path in the TSP as being 10 to 12 feet wide. And that's true, but what you should also know is, despite what Peter said, we're actually not sure if a road can be built there. You know, the TSP says that the Railroad Avenue shall be constructed with improvements that would include the walkway. But if you've ever tried to follow that alignment, it's variable. And there's topography, there's trees, there's wetlands. And, you know, I think we have to admit that at the time we adopted the TSP, in this case, no engineering had been done. But the reason that it was required is so important to the neighborhood. And that's because of the year-round population there. I think the most of the year-round population in Gerhart lives on the east side of the highway. I might be wrong, but at least a large portion of them do. And that 30% of our year-round households are shared with children. The number of families increased from 6% to 18% in Gerhart between 2000 and 2017. And I'm just trying to point out that there are a lot of children over there, and in order to help them from having to get their parents' car, drive out to the highway, and then drive south or north and go into the street where their friend lives, is not ideal, and it's not safe, and they can't do it on their own. And so this trail and or the road along the old railroad alignment, granted, we've lost a lot of it, but I think the city feels we can't necessarily require the road, even though the TSP says if we can't have the road, we at least need the trail. And if we can piece together a trail, which I think we can, this is the very first opportunity that we've had to do this, that we haven't had any good development come up until now. It would be really unfortunate to throw it out. And Chad and I went out there on bicycles and we tried to walk in different parts of the place to figure out how to get through, but it still needs to be site specifically. Sorry, I'm not looking at you over here. It still needs to be carefully surveyed on the site to see exactly what is feasible. And so the planning commission was willing to compromise. And the reason it's so wide is because if you look at the map at the back of parcel 2 and 3, you'll see Railroad Avenue coming up from the south and touching parcel 3 and coming down from the north and then turning into several private pieces of property, set private tax lots. And in order to, so the 45 feet is actually, it's general, and I think it can probably be reduced just for a trail. We're not even talking about the road, because if, and Peter, maybe this is not a good idea, but you can see the edge of the wetlands on the map. If we took that road and continued Railroad Avenue north right through the back two parcels 2 and 3, it would probably get involved in the wetlands, and it then has to curve to the west to align with where we think it will be coming from the north. Now, this may actually be the end of our trail, because that land to the north goes to the county, and they don't have these plans. They don't have this trail in their documents. They don't have the same, let's just say, vision for creating a connecting road trail, to say it that way, for that whole neighborhood, all the way down the Pacific Way and actually all the way down to Oster eventually. And so the 45 was a measurement to try and get from their west corner, 45 feet east, let's say 40, and to then get maybe just a 10-foot connecting piece there, whatever we can get to get over to that Southern Railroad Avenue right away.
Where it says abandoned railroad. Oh, Southern, never mind.
Yeah, well, we're not, this northern piece is the county piece of the Vantas, and it's actually not touching, well, yeah, it is touching part of the abandoned. But we're just talking about from their parcel 2, the northwest corner, parcel 2, down to Railroad Avenue. If it's not 40 feet, we would like to have the staff be able to sit down with the applicant and also go out to the site and see how much we can refine that. Maybe we can get way over to the last 10 feet. And then when you get to the corner, the southwest corner is probably then just jog the trail or the easement, I should say, a little bit east to make a connection. Does that make sense? In terms of, do you understand what I'm saying?
Right, so I think that what we would be telling DLCD is that once we got engineering, a road was not feasible. And so the alternative that was feasible would be a path, which that's something that people can understand and a reason to deviate from the plan that would probably likely be acceptable to them. And then if we were to work in language that said the easement is not to exceed 45 feet, that would allow on that edge of their property, that would allow city staff to work with the applicant in order to determine what could feasibly be built. And later, because it would say not to exceed, that could be refined down to something that was more right sized, if that's the direction that the council wants to go in.
And the good news is this is not final yet, because after the conditions are met that are listed in the notice of decision, you can come back to the planning commission with your final survey plat and the surveyor stamp and everything. And oh, good. And it goes out, planning commission, then evaluates these conditions. Okay. And so I'll come back to that. Let me read you the other conditions. That is condition number 4. Regarding McCormick Gardens Road. Okay, so we know that in the future, the county agreed with me that planning wise, there's a good chance that could be a city street in your growth garden. We don't know when. And so with that in mind, what the condition says is no building permit may be issued until all required street and access easement improvements are in place and approved by the city manager, okay? Or otherwise bonded or deferred in conformance with the TSP and the subdivision ordinance. So you look at 4A, here's the details. The planning commission decided to defer street improvements to McCormick Gardens Road adjoining parcel 1 in lieu of the, period. In lieu of the transportation improvement requirements identified, as we talked about, the applicant shall sign a waiver of remonstrance, participate in a future local improvement district for road improvements to McCormick Gardens Road. The signed waiver shall be submitted to the city with the final plat approval request. This one's a little simpler. This planning commission backed off on the street requirements, even though they're required in your TSP, clearly. Because the TSP does say, and so does the subdivision ordinance, you can defer these if you find there's good reason to. And my planning commission decided, yeah, there is good reason. There's McCormick Gardens Road has a lot of drainage issues. It's very substandard. And to try and take what Peter was saying, one little section of it and bring it up to full standards doesn't make any sense. So we've developed a waiver of remonstrance, and it's this legal looking document, because the city has never used these before. This will be the first one. And it's not all filled in because if you agree with this, then we will type in all the property description and what exactly the improvements are. It's really same as the conditions. And the applicant signs it, notarizes it, the owner, and then it travels with the title of the property in the future. And so those are the 2 conditions. One has to do with the trail of keeping your condition, but considering reducing the 40 to 45 feet to something else and admitting that we're not requiring a road improvement through there. And the second one is for deferring the transportation improvements on McCormick Gardens Road in lieu of the waiver. And I would suggest if you like that idea, or if you want to consider that, condition number 3 at the very bottom of the cover memo is to rewrite it as follows. On the final plat, the path alignment, taking out the 40 to 45 feet, shall be refined and reduced by city staff to the minimum necessary to connect to existing right-of-way to the south. The path may either be dedicated to the public or defined on the plat as a public access easement. That's a recommendation from staff to change number 3 that way and to not change number 4 right above, which is accepting this as an alternative to street improvements on McCormick Gardens Road. Anything else, Peter?
There's some flexibility that we have in approach. There's this decision and then there's some overarching ramifications. And so I think, this, who or when the road could be built, who would pay for the road, it's the owners at the time, and when would that happen? Like, we don't have those answers. But this makes it more likely a road would eventually be built, because the way that a local improvement works is if a majority of the section property owners agree, then the others have to participate as well. So by having non-remonstrance, then you're saying that those future owners couldn't say no. And so a road would be more likely if it were to be constructed using an LID, local improvement district.
And the trail, we also have the flexibility to pretty much accept that we're not gonna have a road there, even though we haven't engineered it. At least if we can get as narrow as a possible connection for a path. Is that in conflict with our code?
You know, I think the applicants have made some good points about just the conditions on the ground. And if the conditions on the ground are such that people do not believe that an outcome can be efficiently engineered, and you know, when I've told council before, when we're talking about exactions, there are two things. One is that there needs to be a nexus between the development and that those exactions are happening. And the other is that they need to be roughly proportionate to the benefit received. And so, you know, could they engineer a road that looks like something in Louisiana? Maybe, but that could be so costly that it wouldn't be roughly proportionate to being able to get a couple of lots. And because of that, having a path not to exceed 45 feet and understanding that it might be less, that would be within the spirit of our transportation system plan and be something that we could explain to DLCD given the conditions on the ground. Again, if you don't want to make that a condition, we'll just need very specific facts as to why.
Yeah, and so just in conclusion, from the staff report at this point, when questions are heavily answered, I see it as like a ridge path on the east side. And we lost a lot of opportunity when we gave all those parcels away or sold them in the past. And that's because we didn't have these parameters by which to avoid that. And to me, the connectivity for just walking, maybe bicycling, will do so much to improve the neighborhood in the long run. Not my lifetime, maybe yours, but it's gonna take a long time to ever get to that point. But that's what planning is. And so,
Thank you, Carol. John, do you want to give us a report?
Sure, okay. I guess I'll start off with the road. My name is John Banton. I'm here to speak on behalf of my family in the appeal for the City of Gearhart Planning Commission decision regarding the Banta petition. We respectfully request that, the first item, the Planning Commission is requiring the family to make improvements on 187 feet of McCormick Garden Road. This consists of sidewalks and curbs. Again, only for 187 feet of the Banta frontage. They have stated the work costs be deferred by signing a waiver until such time the city adopts their TSP for the road improvements. By requiring this waiver for their future road TSP, which we have no financial control of, they essentially are requesting a blank check. With the time frame and dollars amount undetermined, this creates a reasonable restraint on the family to move forward with any improvements or developments. The TSP for McCormick Gardens Road from Pacific to the UGB Urban Growth Boundaries G2 is a city/county endeavor at a 2016 cost of $3,265,000. Unless Gearhart develops its additional revenue streams, the city cannot expect to have more than 1.2 million of local street funds to spend on local fund improvements over the next 20 years. The finding also fails to indicate, as required by the development code, how the required improvements directly relate to and are roughly compatible with the impact of development. This is required by settling the land use law under two landmark Supreme Court decisions. Nolan versus California Coastal Commission and Dolan versus the City of Tyrant. In the city and in the state and land use board of Appeals, the LUBA, the decision of Clark versus the City of Albany, 31 OR Luba 375, 1996 states, where there is substantial evidence in the record to justify a city's finding that there is a need for a local improvement district, LID, and that the development will both contribute to the need for those improvements and benefit by them. The city may require the petition to sign a waiver. For further street improvements, the commission approval did not include a finding in their new substantial evidence, and there is a need for one, that there is a need for one. This is known as the Clark Pest Land Use Law, and the city failed it. Moreover, if the road improvements cannot be accomplished as part of a larger project in the future, how can the city justify contemplating the formation of a local improvement district, LID, or require a waiver against this formula, since the LID would be a mechanism to accomplish such a larger project? In our appeal, the item 2A, the documentation from Clatsop County Public Works, it is stated that McCormick Gardens Road is outside Gerhardt's urban growth boundary, the UGB, and is a county road. As stated by the Clatsop County, there is no foreseeable future of widening or improvements to it. Quote, there may be some chip seal, maybe some paving. The road is too currently constricted by wetlands for most of its length to do anything more. Now, the Gerhardt City Planner has noted in the staff report, speaking with Clatsop County Public Works, that a deferral is possible. Future improvements to McCormick Gardens Road is appropriate because the county may give the road to the city of Gerhardt. Let's revisit McCormick. McCormick Gardens Road is a county road. This information has been supplied by the commissioners as well as Clatsop County for well over a year. Please see item 3 as well in the letter. With the letter, I think it has been testified, but in the letter, it's stated by Terry Hendricks that the road is Clatsop County. At this point, the road is Clatsop County. We've been dealing with this for over a year. The road is still Clatsop County. We're asking to do it now before it's turned over to the city, and we're asking for that to be done. It just seems like if it's not owned by the city, how can the city tell us what we need to do to it? The second decision we are appealing is regarding the shared use path, railroad right away. The planning commission is demanding that the Banta family donate 40 to 45 feet of tax lot 0900 for the purpose of planned TSP shared use path. Yeah, in item 1, the standard this path is 14 to 16, which we talked about. Remember, they're asking for 40 to 45 feet. John and Sally obtained tax lot 0900 by quiet title case, item 1C, as well as several other homeowners along the grade. Please note item 1B in our appeal. Property owners along this potential path who signed it are objecting to any foot traffic on their existing properties. Safety was their #1 concern for all. The general concern is that there will become a safe haven for transients building encampments in the woods, areas bordering the path and keeping their homes and businesses safe. How will the police be able to monitor this area, mandate their and moderate it in addition to their other duties? How do you keep citizens on the path and not wandering onto private properties where injuries, theft, and lawyering will occur if it's not policed? This is a hot topic for the city. The pressure put on the herds, this path will have a direct impact on the herds in this area and will one less safe place for habitat. How will the dangerous elk versus human interactions be controlled when it's already out of control? The planned TSP path is at a cost of $3,030,000 from Pacific Way Park Lane to Pacific Parkway Lane. Remember, from the Park Lane to Hillenda Road is Clatsop County, which we talked about in that in the 5/14/2020 meeting. The Clatsop County has no intention of continuing onto his current, which we talked about, onto his current property. In closing, we are not here to speculate on what may or may not happen in the future. The fact has been that McCormick Gardens Road is a county road. The city cannot hold us responsible for improvements to a road that is not theirs. It is just cannot be made on what may have already be reality. Become reality. When there's no factors to validate their theory. The same be true to the railroad right away. The facts are today that you do not have or will have without neglect to safety and infrastructure, the rest of the city to fund the TSP. And yes, you do not have the public support to patrol and monitor this area. Vacancy, vandalism, and safety. I just want to end this with the family is having a hard time. This McCormick Garden Road, you go up and down McCormick Garden Road, you talk to the people on McCormick Garden Road, ask them what this road is. They'll tell you it's a county road. Nobody thinks of it as the city road. It's a county road. We went in this with a county road. I'm having a hard time understanding that because we may have a plan at the city of Gearhart, we need to put this in, you're gonna hold the family accountable for years down the road of an expense that we have no control of. I guess that's about all I have.
Thank you.
You have any questions for me? I guess that's the first question.
Council, do you have questions for Mr. Banta? Peter, you're muted.
I'm not muted. Am I? No, I think Peter is muted. He was talking, it looked like.
The non-remonstrance runs with the land, not with the family. So if the family were to sell these lots and then in 50 years down the road, however long, whoever, this will be recorded, the non-remonstrance agreement. And if there ever was that event, then the owners at the time of the event would be the ones that would be responsible for the payment to the local improvement district.
And if I can also correct something, it's not $3,030,000 for a trail. It's $3,030,000 for the street and the walking and biking facility on this Railroad Avenue alignment. These still allotted. That's for the trail. And it's not uncommon also for a city and a county to have to bump up jurisdictions and deal with road improvements. It's really quite common, and we would work with the county, and honestly, they said, well, for long range planning, we can't tell you, you can't require a waiver because it might work out. It might take a long time.
Yeah, but isn't this, can I speak? I'm sorry.
May I just ask a question before? Is the county not requiring that same type of waiver then?
Well, no, wait, the city touches the street. In fact, the Vances did give up 10 feet of right of way in last year's partition when they first started this. And so the right of way is there now, and their property touches the frontage of the street, but then it becomes county jurisdiction. And the county improvements, maybe Mr. Banton, you can tell us what their partition requirements are for McCormick Gardens Road on the other side of the city limits. Do they have?
None that I know of. No, I could be. Sorry.
We cannot partition the back land because it's all wetland, so there will not be anything else there. That's all that can be done on that land.
I jumped back to McCormick Gardens Road now.
But you said the county land.
Well, when you are driving McCormick Gardens Road, you pass the city limits, now you have the county partition that you just did. And with that partition, did they require any?
Nothing.
Okay. But that's not our jurisdiction.
Right.
So it is their road.
Yeah, but it goes back to, it's a county road from the corner all the way down. So there, I mean, that is what the question is, I don't, I guess I'm having a hard time, I mean, yeah, I feel like the family is being held hostage. And you can say that it's passed down. The idea is this is staying in the family. So no matter how many years down the road, somebody in the Banta family is gonna be paying for this improvement. And I can't pass it on to my grandchildren or my, thinking that I'm sending them into debt for hundreds of thousands of dollars for sidewalks and curbs and road replacement. And when it's not even something that is owned by the city doesn't even know that it's gonna acquire it yet. Hasn't acquired it yet. The county came to talk about it to you at this meeting because we acquired to the county about it. So it's hard to believe that we're this far on a TSP plan that isn't even yours. I mean, you don't even own the road. Thank you.
Do any other counselors have questions for the Bantas? No? So I think we're ready to close the public hearing.
But just to help you then, we're talking about condition 3 and 4. And you can look on page 12 of the very last part of the record. See those as they're written by the planning commission's decision. And then if you wanted to modify that and provide you with some wording, not regarding McCormick Gardens Road, but the trail on Railroad.
You can say. Thank you.
So so number 4 on the decision on page 12, that's the one.
4A, I'm sorry, I should have said 4A.
Okay, 4A.
4A, excuse me.
Because that was my question.
Yeah.
It's the McCormick Gardens Road piece.
Yeah.
And so I just want to restate what your recommendation is to maintain 4A the same as the planning commission recommended,
Yes.
which is to have the applicant sign a waiver remonstrance to participate in a future data unknown local improvement district should the city ever be the owner of that street and has significant resource to move forward on an improvement project.
But, and more importantly, there's at least 60% or more of the property owners also have waivers. It's not gonna happen just with their property. Unless the city does their road project on their own, independent of the waiver, and the waiver is moved, right? So, this would have to be a neighborhood majority. And it is a good chance, as it's the city grows, that it becomes a city street. We don't know, but it could.
Thank you. And
I'll be honest, I'm still mulling over in my head what I think about McCormick Garden Road, but as far as the path itself, Carol and I got to chat about it a little bit a few weeks ago. And it's very unfortunate that 30 years ago, this wasn't thought of and planned appropriately when it was really feasible. mean, I know specifically, the old railroad right of way goes through the back of my house currently. You know, and there's so many places that it's really not feasible to pull this off. I know, sitting at dinner last night, my wife said, so what would happen if this, you know, if this were to happen, in, you know, behind our house? I said, well, my assumption is the path would be right next to our fence at this point. What would that mean? You know, there's wetlands probably 30 feet away, so you can't go any further to the east of that location. You know, whether we can pull it off, I don't know. It seems burdensome to me to have allowed how many subdivisions that have backed up to this railroad grade at this point. I'm guessing in the 10 range, maybe, on the highway. You know, different subdivisions over the last 30 years that have been applied for and granted, and this has never been brought up, though it's a good idea. It seems burdensome to me to demand the use of this property of the Bantas when we have of everybody else. I agree, I think it's a good idea. I think it's worthy of doing. So my proposal based on that is, recently we had the reverse of this, where somebody wanted city property as their own, and we sold some city property to enhance their lot. And they paid us for it.
For street vacation.
For street vacation. So why aren't we doing the reverse of that and offering, if we want this use of this land, why aren't we offering to pay the Bantas for use of that land? To me, that seems fair and appropriate, but to just take it, I have a heartburn with it. And knowing that what we're wanting to use backs up to wetlands, chances are that might sit better with the Bantas if we were compensating. But I just outright taking it, I don't think it's right.
Any other commissioners have a statement or any questions?
I have a question, if I can get some clarification.
Go ahead.
The ask from the planning commission for 40 to 45 feet to meet up with the Railroad Avenue, which is 50 feet, which is substandard to our requirements for roads. Why is it that it was done that way?
The 40 to 45 feet.
Well, in 4A, I'm sorry, in the staff number 3, they were asking for 40 to 45 feet. And the Railroad Avenue is 50 feet. Why is it narrowing in that one section? Why weren't they asking for 50 feet? And the second part of this question is, who's crossing whose land there? Are we going to cross the Wrights or Pavolola's land to get to the Bantas property? Because to me, according to this S&F Land Service, the Railroad Avenue does not meet their property. And so we have to cross somebody's property to get to that trail. And how are we going to do that? Are we going to eminent domain them, buy it from them? Those are the two questions I have. Why has it gone down to 45 feet when the Railroad Avenue is 50? And how are we getting across that little section of land?
Yeah, we're not. Can we answer that?
Yes,
I hope
please.
so.
Yes, I was gonna tell
I
you.
got it on straight.
Okay, so the reason the 40 to 45 feet was an estimate, and we've already agreed that that needs to be refined in your decision tonight, if you decide that there should be a connection of any kind, to be more exact. it wasn't 50 because unfortunately you can't measure this, the surveyor, it's about 30 feet from parcel 3's southwest corner to touch that Railroad Avenue you're talking about, 50-foot wide one. It's about 30 feet. And the estimate was, well, how do we get to that? You need about 40 feet to get to touch that Railroad Avenue right away that's there with a path. Forget the road, but with a path, 10 feet would work. So that's why the planning commission settled on that, knowing it wasn't exactly accurate, and we agree that it should be refined. It may be that you can go just 10 feet of dedication, not even dedication, just an easement. If the Banses don't want to dedicate it to the city for a trail, the city will also accept an easement on their property. It's still their property. Okay, so if we can go, let's say 10 feet from their north to their south corner, and yes, then we have to jog over to Railroad Avenue. And yes, it does have probably about 8 feet of gap there with Eldon Wright's property in between. And, we're not building the path. Let's just start with that. There's no plan to build a path. We're just trying to start to piece together bit by bit some kind of connection, and it won't be perfect. Down the line, if finally a type of a ridge path ever gets agreed to and enough pieces come together, then we would talk about the cost and how to do it. But so it's interesting because I'm also talking with the buyer of the Pavla property, the storage units there, and he's willing to talk about maybe giving up 5 or 10 feet for that, where the storage units are, if we can physically come to some agreement on how to do that. So it's, it's the start. It's never been done. Does it seem like a taking to the city? Yes, it does. But that's what transportation plans are for. And this is the first test of it, and it's uncomfortable, admittedly. But if we can minimize the impact and still make this work in the future, it would benefit the entire neighborhood or sections of a neighborhood. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
And maybe I should reread the recommendation of how to rewrite that number 3. So you look at page 2 of my cover letter. Condition number 3, rewrite the last sentence. Well, let me hear the second, the last sentence. On the final plat, that's new language, the path cross out shall be an estimated 40 to 45 feet wide. On the final plat, the path alignment, these are new words, shall be refined and reduced by city staff to the minimum necessary. And then it goes on to finish, to connect to existing right of way to the south. May be either dedicated or defined on the plat as a public access easement.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Rita.
Okay, well, I would like to know what percentage of the other property owners have ceded their portion of Railroad Avenue back to the public or the city of Gearhart? How many other landowners are you going to have to deal with on this?
As far as I know, 0. This is the first attempt where your transportation plan requirements kick in because they turned 1 lot into 5 lots. And that the nexus is the redevelopment, the subdivision of the property triggers the ability for the city to require these transportation improvements. So I think I have said more than once, it's a long road to get there. and nobody has done it yet. And that's where Peter mentioned that there's a precedent being set that we can't say that we've done this up and down the street. So why not the Bantas? Because that hasn't happened yet.
So if they had not wanted to partition their land, we would not even be talking about this. Is this
Yes,
correct? All right.
absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments by the counselors?
I've got a question. So it sounds like 40 to 45 feet may be excessive, depending on what the engineering says it takes to create a path. And I think I'm correct in saying that an easement does not have to be straight. It could be curved.
Right.
Just it has to be described accurately in a legal description. Would the planning commission be comfortable stating some kind of minimum and maximum range of the easement? So if I heard 10 feet mentioned, 15 feet. If we could say that we're shooting for the minimum size and that size will be somewhere between 10 and 15 feet, would that be more acceptable to the Bantas?
Yes, the shared use path in the transportation plan is 10 to 12 feet in its design, and its, in its specifications. And, if we get lucky with other property owners and they can give up some, I think we could settle for 10, and that would be the minimum to be able to put the path in. And if you're right, it'd be 10 from the northwest corner to down almost to the southwest corner, and then it needs to curve a little bit or just turn and take a little corner section to tie into Railroad Avenue.
Okay, so if we described what we're after a little better and narrowed the parameters from 40 to 45 feet to 10 to 12 feet.
Yeah, and the revision to the condition takes out the 40 to 45 feet and just says be refined and reduced by city staff to the minimum necessary.
Right, I understand that, and I think that was a very, very good concession on the commission's part. I'm just saying the comfort level may be enhanced by stating the range of 10 to 12 feet instead of just having a vague minimum size.
I think that would be a good improvement.
And I guess follow up to the Bantas. So if we had that kind of smaller asked, more defined, would you be comfortable with that?
Can I talk?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
My question is this a burden that's gonna go on both property owners on the west side and the east side of the road, or of the grade, or is it just a burden that one family is gonna take on their side and the other side doesn't take any burden?
No, it will always be the intent to do half and half if it works, if the alignment works. And we don't have enough to go on yet, but like I said, if in a casual conversation with the buyer, the people to the west, they have some topography that drops down to that back of that storage business. We probably couldn't get much more than 5 feet. I didn't get a chance to go over and look today, but I talked to them a few days ago, and he said, well, I want to expand my storage up against that ridge, that I'm pretty sure it goes up in the back of his property. And, you know, it's just gonna be how we can best do it to the minimum necessary, which is 10 to 12 feet. Now, within your period of writing up your final plat and coming back to the city and getting them to say, yes, you met all the conditions, we might know that by then.
Okay, the other half, I mean, we went out and talked to property owners on both sides, got signatures from property owners on both sides. You know, we came up with 26 signatures that were related to that railroad grade that were all had concern. The biggest first concern was for them was safety. And that was the number one priority for each person that signed, was they felt, you know, was the safety policy. You know, and the biggest issue is that everybody's concerned about is how do you control that side of the highway? I mean, you know, our police force isn't growing. We don't have control. You're not gonna have we don't have a walking control. How do we handle it? I mean, how do we monitor what's going on? And it's not necessarily on my side or on the Bantha side of the, because they got a creek to go through. You have people that have housing like Dan said, that are built right up, those houses are right up to that property line. That railroad grade has been consumed by houses. At the other end, it's on both ends, it's consumed by businesses.
Is there no setback at all?
No.
There is a required setback.
Now,
And it's just like the ridge path, you know,
We
we
went to-
built another section of the ridge path.
well, Lowenberg's, Bob at Lowenberg is building right now that he has a foundation. Does that not run right through that?
Yes, it does.
So I don't know how that works.
Well, his foundation's in violation.
That work was stopped.
That's
That
trespass.
work is stopped?
That work was stopped.
Okay. I tried.
Good catch.
Yeah.
That's what's going on with that property. It's been used for other things, and people have owned it since 82. Since 1982, my parents and everybody else's parents and everybody else's families have purchased that. They've been paying taxes on that. And they have used it for personal things, because they own it. Because we're 900 feet away on that other side, it doesn't matter. You still have people that are 25 feet away on the west side. And that's the concern it comes down to. And, you know, they came to us when my sister started talking about it. We had people coming to us asking to sign this. It was weird because they were concerned about it. I had people that asked if they could come to the meeting so they could speak on behalf of it. You know, I think it's a bigger issue than what we've all looked at in this room. That's.
I feel that walking paths are an integral part of the development of Gerhardt. For me, it's the only way that we look back to the comp plan, which advocates for healthy activities, being out, walking, not being in our cars all the time. And we're just a little town that can't build a road everywhere. We've got landlocked neighborhoods. And so to try and be visionary in terms of trails and pathways just seems like a prudent way forward, even if it's hard. Even if it's hard you have to start somewhere to try and develop those segments that could be made into a trail. We had a Gerhardt goal 30 years ago to extend the ridge path, and it's just now coming to fruition. And yes, you are walking right by houses that are being built. People are buying them. They don't seem that concerned about transients. I mean, I don't know. I just think the trails are important. We're commission discussion and deliberation in the last two pieces.
So are we willing to put our money where our mouth is and buy the right to use it? I mean, if it's important, if you think it's important, why aren't we paying for it?
That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. So once we define the land that we want, we can have an appraiser come out and appraise it.
Well, you know, we're not going to be, I'm sorry, was I talking over someone?
No, go ahead, Carrie.
We're not developing this immediately. What we're asking for is an easement for in the future. And honestly, I don't see it going very much farther than an easement for a good 10 or 20 years, but it'll be there for the public if people start to see the logic in having something to connect the east side, north and south. I don't feel that we need to buy anything. All we have to do is ask for an easement that is not going to be developed, is not going to be full of transients because we're not putting in any walkways for them. And if they are there, it's because they're in the storage unit living in the RVs. But I think an easement of 10 to 12 feet, like Brent said, and that's my feeling on the west side property.
Can I add a personal note? I live on the Ridge Path. And I have for 70 years almost. And I didn't have to pay for it. And I use it all the time to get to City Hall when I come to meetings. I walk down the Ridge Path. I don't have to get my car. And I've never seen a homeless person there. I have seen an elk run by very seldomly. And it's just like the Ridge Path. I mean, and I feel so lucky to have that. You can go for how many blocks? 20? And get so much contact with nature and so much, exercise, and it's just a beautiful place. If we could even start to piece something together like that on the east side for all those kids, it's a vision. I agree, it's long-term. It may never happen. And the easement would be the least restrictive way to go about it rather than a dedication.
May I ask you a question?
Go ahead.
The Railroad Avenue, as it's depicted on this survey, so to the south of the Banta property, is that Railroad Avenue right of way? Is that reported through properties,
Anywhere else?
yes, or is it just what we're seeing?
You mean all the way down to like Pacific Way?
Yeah, or any portion of it.
So I have a map up here for you.
Yes, there's pieces, as I recall, or
And so we have the Banta property, this right here. So here's the Banta piece of property.
Right.
Here is the beginning of, or the end of Railroad Will.
where are you now? Are you pointing it
And then that goes all the way
just south of the
To-
storage?
Pacific Way. Now. And these properties. Sorry, it's taking a minute up to. Past Terry Lomberg's office. And there is Pacific Way.
And we think that's maybe about, I don't know, 40 feet wide.
That, where it is now is here.
90, 50.
Approximately. No, my measurement's not coming, but that's fine. It's approximately 60 feet.
Oh, 60, that's a lot. And actually, this would be the last segment until anything is annexed in the city in the future, which could also happen.
So. When I look at where that's at. So it does cut right through, what used to be the old Palmer paving road and
Yeah.
such.
Mhm.
So there's nothing hindering that Railroad Avenue.
Except topography. In terms of putting a road, which is the plan in the TSB, it's supposed to be a road. There's variation in the topography and the,
And when we walked it, there's sometimes it's really close to a steep grade or a wetland. And some of it goes up and down. Now, all that could be changed, of course. I mean, just the elevation change from the end of the railroad, to, a section of Banta's property is about a 20-foot climb somewhere in there. So it's a little steep, but everything, from when I walked it, it's possible.
So it's all based on who chose to not steal the sand, to remove the sand and do with it as they
Yeah.
saw fit versus.
I can
those
show you
who
what
haven't
that
taken
looks
the
like.
sand.
If you want
you're
to,
exactly right.
if you want to see what that looks like, actually, here's the bare earth picture. So you can see that the grade is all the way over there. There are a few flat spots that go all the way to Hillilla. And there's Sturgill's and McFarland's property where the line kind of grades through. But up through the Banta property, most of the way through Polstoway, it's fairly, it's intact.
And is it not true that to the neighborhoods going to the north, there is an informal pathway now?
I don't know,
Don't know,
I don't
from the Vantas north.
Well, it would be on the other side of Halala.
Oh,
Yeah.
that one.
I don't think there's a pass through Sturgill's property. No, I was just up there a couple months ago looking at another issue.
Are you talking north on Lillard?
But yeah,
North, I mean,
Hillilla to the south, right
I think
there.
Kalina's
I'm
asking.
talking about to the
Oh,
north,
to the
going
north.
north to the,
Yeah, there is a little bit of a, see, this is known as Trestle Drive in here. There used to be.
There still is in the,
There's some houses that are accessed from that.
Yeah, and just to identify that, that is county land right there. Oh, no, excuse me, Tom Brown, Shelley
Mhm.
Brown. Own this Trestle Drive piece that continues. That's the Brown property there. So at one point, again, I think you said in the 70s or 80s, there was the opportunity for you folks to buy the right of way on either side. And many people did, some people did not, some people bought the whole thing. So it is cut up.
But that's why I'm actually surprised to see that the city actually does have that right of way for that long road.
Yeah,
we've thought it could be a road from Pacific Way to Fifth, possibly. If that ever went through like the Palmberg connection that was ever developed, and that portion could possibly be a road and a path. But in this case, it's too steep for a road.
to the Palmer property.
Hmm?
You could probably cut something in close to the Palmer property where the easement goes through, where Strickland now owns, just past your property. After that, it becomes difficult. It would be very difficult roadway, but it's not a sacred dune, it's a dune that could be manipulated if you cut, move.
are there any other questions from the council?
Would anybody have any heartburn about splitting these two things and these two?
Two different motions?
Yes.
Well, we'll wait till we get to a motion, I think. Are there any other questions? Can we defer them? Mr. Banta, you had another hand up or wanted to
Oh,
say
I was
something?
just gonna say one more thing on the back. I mean, you know, when people bought on the east side of the highway, they bought for seclusion in a lot of cases. I have friends that live back there and have actually made the comment that if this actually goes through, they would probably go somewhere else because they're looking for their privacy. You know, you bought that property, you've been on it for 30 years, and you lose that privacy. It's not only, I understand the walkability, I love walking, I like walking around the golf course, I'm with everybody else in your heart that walks around it. It's hard to tell property owners that have been there 30, 40, 50, in some cases 60-year family members, that the property is being taken for a walk path, and the house that you have sitting right next to it is now gonna become a public trail. They didn't buy that for that. When they moved into that property, that wasn't there, that had never been talked about. And frankly, if we hadn't done what we were trying to do, we would have done this 10 years ago, we wouldn't be having this conversation now. It's something because the opportunity is here now. And I feel like the opportunity is to pick on the Banta family at this point, because we're the ones, the first ones trying to do this. And I know, and that's not why postal aides live there, that's not why, you know, I mean, you can go down the list of people that live there that have concerns about it. And it's privacy. If I lived in Cecil or Gearhart and I moved onto the Ridge Path, I understand what the Ridge Path is, and it's been there for as many years as I've been here, and I know people are gonna walk on it. If I buy a house on Cottage, I understand people are gonna be walking by it. But if you buy a house 5 acres off the road, you think you have privacy. And you bought that property from the railroad grade at that time because you wanted to keep that privacy. That's why you've been paying taxes on it. Anyway.
Are we ready to, is there more deliberation? Are we ready to entertain a motion?
I think so, but there's no more questions.
Does anyone on the council want to make a motion with regard to, why don't we just go ahead and start with condition 4A?
Which piece of paper is it?
Okay, this is on page,
I know, there's a lot of people.
page 2 of Carol's report. Page 2.
So is this,
Very top.
we have 3 packets.
You're not gonna.
It's a tiny packet. Page 2 of the staff report.
Yeah, I don't think it's in there. Well, maybe it is.
That's why,
No, yeah, there it
which
is.
one is the staff report? You can't just say it's the staff report when nothing says staff report.
It says at the top, staff report.
Not on the
Second page,
statement
second
page.
Oh, the next page, I think. Let me see, because I think Cheryl put the notice on top. Right there. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So page 2.
Page 2, there is in bold, it says motion. And not knowing what you wanted to do, I thought maybe we should do 2 separate motions. In case we want to do something different with 4A from number 3. But we'll entertain any motion anybody wants to make.
Well, I'll make a motion that we strike condition 4.
Wait, 4A.
4A,
Is that what you meant?
either one.
Yeah, 4 in general has sub A, B, C. We don't have it on this piece.
It's just 4A.
4A, otherwise it's 4A, B, and C. We're not talking about B and C, we're just talking about 4A. And that's McCormick Gardens Road waiver remonstrance.
That I make a motion, we strike 4A from the requirements.
Is there a second? Not hearing a second. Would anyone like to make any other motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the council affirms the planning commission decision to require a waiver of remonstration stance for number 4A.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there discussion? Are we ready to call the question then? All those in favor say aye.
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 Okay. So there are 4 ayes and 1 nay. And would someone like to make a motion amending condition 3?
Well, I would like to make a motion that we amend condition 3, including paying for the right for whatever easement that is deemed appropriate.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
So I'm gonna try and just restate the motion. For condition number 3, on the final plat, the path alignment shall be refined and reduced by city staff to 10 to 12 feet in the form of an easement, with the petitioner to be compensated for the easement based on.
I would make a recommendation, we do something similar to the street vacation procedure.
I have no problem with that. I actually hate to hamstring the size at this point. If it's deemed that 15 feet makes more sense or 18 feet makes more sense. To me, then that's appropriate as long as we're compensating the owners appropriately. So, which is why I made the motion of
Not 10 to 12,
yes.
so minimum necessary,
So leave it as it is.
minimum
Refined and
necessary.
reduced by the city staff to the minimum necessary.
Yes.
So I'm gonna rewrite that, I'm just gonna reread that then. On the final plat, the path alignment shall be refined and reduced by city staff to the minimum necessary easement
In the form of,
in
form of an easement.
in the form of an easement
With
with the petitioner compensated using the procedures for a street vacation.
Sounds great.
Are there any other questions? That's the motion and it's been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. I didn't hear two. All those opposed?
Nay.
I don't think I've heard Rita's.
I didn't hear Rita.
Oh, I vote aye.
You vote aye.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, hold on, who was the nay? The nay was Counselor Smith,
Yes, it was.
and the aye was everybody else. Okay. Are we ready to entertain a motion to adjourn?
I
Yeah.
move we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Good night, everybody.
Good night. See you later.